I want to introduce our next speakers. We have two panelists, starting with Jessica Tyler. Jessica works with the Justice Center with Tony Fabello, who you've heard from earlier this morning, designing and managing research projects, data analysis, and writing. And before that, she worked with us at the Office of Court Administration, conducting research for courts and as well as indigent defense services. And she has a BA from UT, a master's in public policy from the College of William and Mary, and a master's of political science from the University of Houston. And then our second speaker is Alex Bunin. He's the chief public defender in Harris County, a position he's held for 1 year. He began his legal career in Houston in private practice before joining the Federal Public Defender's Office in Beaumont, and then founding an additional public defender, federal public defender in Mobile, Alabama, and then after that for the Northern District of Northern New York and Vermont. And so he came to Houston from that long line of federal public defender service. So with that, I'm going to welcome Jessica Tyler and Alex Bunin.
Thanks, Wesley. I'm going to go first, and then Jessie has a PowerPoint. I don't have a PowerPoint, but she's threatened to randomly display slides while I'm talking, so if you see that. I've been, actually not a year yet, I've been the public defender in Harris County for about 10 months. And people come up and ask me and say, okay, well, what's your biggest problem? I guess I only really have one problem: high expectations. You're really expected to do well, to do perfect. When Senator Ellis has your cell phone number and can call you, I was in my garage working on maintenance on my road bike. My cell phone rang. He says, "This is Rodney Ellis calling from South Africa." Okay, so there is some pressure there, but other than that, I don't really have a lot of problems to report. Before I tell you a little bit about the history of where we are and how it fits in with this idea of a learning site, let me just do a quick plug for Amy's book. She sold it pretty well, but I got to tell you, that's the best thing I've read in a long time. It's called Ordinary Injustice, which is hard to say, and I think Tony might have said Ordinary Justice this morning. Before this, I was the federal public defender in Northern New York, and I was an adjunct in Albany Law School, and Amy came and sat on a panel that was moderated by the chief judge of our highest court in New York, which is the Court of Appeals, Judge Lippman. And every time he would say ordinary justice, because it's so hard. I mean, it's not natural to talk about injustice as being ordinary. And people constantly get it wrong, but I think her book's right on point. I had some real connection with some of the stories. Troy, New York is across the river from Albany. So while that judge was a state court judge and I had nothing to do with the state court system, I heard all the stories about him. And yes, there were lawyers who said, oh, he was a great judge. Pled people guilty when they didn't even know they were pleading guilty. Okay. So, these things happen, and when a system is falling apart, people within the system don't know it. So it kind of helps, and one of the reasons why I've always kind of come from somewhere else to open a defender office is because I felt like if I came from somewhere else and people said, as Jessica just mentioned, well, we've always done it that way, then my next question is, okay, why? And when there's not a good answer, then I have an entree into trying to change things. So I think it's good to get somebody sometimes from the outside to come in and shake things up, but the first thing you got to do is get trust and make relationships at that point, because you get a pretty short honeymoon. So I started last December. I had nothing. I had no staff. I had no office. Bob Wessels, who was then the county courts manager, gave me a phone and lent me a computer, and I started working. I started hiring people. By February, we had completely staffed what we call our misdemeanor mental health session. We have 5 lawyers who take cases in which persons who have been identified as acutely mentally ill or intellectually disabled are represented by our lawyers. In fact, it's not a matter of a judge making that determination and appointing us. Every morning, a computer algorithm generated tells us who those clients are going to be in the 15 county courts of law, and those lawyers are there to represent them. So they're there even sooner than the judge may even know that they're needed. And we also represent people in other cases. The other part that was operational by February was our appellate division, which represents defendants in Harris County convicted in either the misdemeanor or mostly the felony courts. We have 22 felony district courts. So By February, I had an entire appellate section, which was 12 lawyers. I had a misdemeanor mental health section, which was 5 lawyers. We had investigators, social workers, and then I began working on building what is now our felony trial section, which just started work October 1. I've got a felony chief and 12 lawyers that are representing people in any non-capital felony in Harris County. And so we are on the wheel, just like other lawyers are. We generically come up Harris County Public Defender, and the court coordinators call us, and we send a lawyer to their court. And we've been, since October 1, been pretty busy. So there's been a real welcoming of that process. This summer, I met with both the county court judges and the district judges at their respective retreats, and at that point, we hadn't been in the felony courts yet, so I was a little apprehensive about how the criminal judges would, district judges would welcome us, but they did. And the big applause line was when I explained to them, every time you appoint us in a case, you don't have to review and sign a voucher. And they all just started clapping. They thought that was great, because that's probably the worst part of their jobs is reviewing vouchers. So the felony division's up and running. I have now hired all the people for our juvenile division, which is the last part of our office that has to come together, and those people will come on board the end of next month, and we will be taking juvenile cases in December. The next question people ask me is, well, how many people do you have? And day to day, I don't always get that question right. 3 new people came on this week. We had a lawyer, an administrative assistant, and an investigator started. So it's always changing, but I can tell you at the end of next month, we'll have about 54 people on staff. Approximately 36 of them will be lawyers, rest investigators, administrators, social workers. So things have been very busy. We started off in temporary space. During the summer, the county built out our permanent space. We had an open house last week. We had 110 people show up. Senator Ellis came, Congresswoman Lee, county commissioners. We have about 17,000 feet on the 13th floor of the Criminal Justice Center in downtown Houston. Built out from scratch to our specifications. It's beautiful, all brand new furniture. Everybody's got brand new computers. All the lawyers got laptops and a docking station, so do investigators and social workers. The commission was very helpful to us when, our initial first-year budget is paid by the state. We got a grant that paid our budget the first year, and one of the problems is it took salaries from day one, which our fiscal year is the state fiscal year, from October 1 to September 30th. And, of course, I didn't start till December, and I didn't hire people until well into the year, so we had a lot of money left for salaries, and the commission agreed to reappropriate some of that money for things we needed to finish up putting the office together, our equipment, our furniture. So a lot of that money got moved around, and we were able to buy those things. And now, we have a really good infrastructure set up so that we won't need new things for a while. So all that is good. What we're really here to talk about today, though, is how we're going to manage the office, assess what we're doing, adopt performance measures. And I was thinking about that from day one, because I started in the federal system. And in 1993, when I started in Beaumont as assistant federal public defender, they had just initiated timekeeping and an internal case management system. And I was kind of leery about that, because I had never had to keep time records. And I did that throughout my career as a defender there. But I don't think they ever really used them for anything. I think they thought this was a good idea, would keep time, but the system was a little unwieldy, and I don't know that it ever resulted in any reports or anything. And the case management system itself wasn't really built all that well. It was built internally. It was an old program they call Fox Pro. You might know those. And it had this little icon of a fox that would come up the bottom of your screen when you turned it on. And in the beginning, it was set up so that you could keep opening the program, so you'd have all these little foxes at the bottom of the screen, and the lawyer came to me and says, my computer's running really slow. And it's because he had them all open. It's a huge system. Anyway, so I was familiar with the idea of case management and collecting numbers, but it had always been treated as a bad thing in the federal defender system. It was like, well, we don't want to count that stuff because there's nothing really good we can count. And it's not going to be helpful. So what if we count how many acquittals we have? Nobody's going to like that. So, what kind of things are worth counting? And it wasn't really thought that well, and there was a lot of dissension within. But I think over time, and as you heard from Amy this morning, the idea of metrics in judging criminal defense systems is becoming much more sophisticated, and we're thinking about it more. And I thought, well, here's a time, I'm in charge. maybe we can make this work. And I looked at other systems, and I thought, well, maybe there's a model out there that we can copy. And apparently North Carolina was collecting all this data. And I went to a conference this summer where the two top guys of the Indigent defense system from North Carolina were there, and I said, I hear you've been collecting all this data. Well, what are your outcomes? And they said, well, we really don't have anything yet. So they're still adding more measures and more measures, but they don't have any data. So we are, in some senses, inventing a wheel here. We're trying to figure out what measures we should be tracking, what we should be doing. One of the bases for performance measures in our office is what you'll hear from Jeff Blackburn and Andrea Marsh later. The state now has, they're calling them standards. I took those, like the first month I was there, read through them. I mean, there are things like, well, you need to meet with your client in a certain number of hours. You need to, think about your motion practice. You need all the things you need to do in a non-capital case. And I took those and I made them specific to our office. I made some of them even more strict. You had to meet with your client quicker than those, things like that. And I thought, okay, well, these can be some of the bases. We can add this as things we're going to collect. And so the other thing I had to do was find a case management system. And there's some commercial products out there, and what I ended up with, and I'm not trying to push them, I think other offices here in Texas also use them. There's a company called Justice Works out of Utah, and they have a system called Defender Data. And what I liked about it was, one, it was fairly inexpensive, and also they were extremely flexible. If you call them up and say, well, we need you to arrange this around on your screen, they'll do it, and fairly quickly. And then the other place that wanted to do it was unbelievably expensive. I think I could have hired like 3 lawyers for the cost of what this other place wanted for a data system. So we have that in place, and part of our grant said that we were supposed to work on some kind of system of performance measures and reporting, and that's when I started working with Jim Bethke, but also brought me in contact with Tony Fabello and his organization, Council of State Governments Justice Center, and thought, well, maybe this is the best match for us if we can get them excited about doing our project. And so it's really been a great thing. And I really like the term they're using for this. They're calling it a learning site, because that's what it is, because we don't know yet exactly how this is going to work. We have a lot of good ideas. We're collecting a lot of numbers. And I think, at least for misdemeanor mental health, we may even have some outcomes next year. But it's kind of a long-term thing where we're looking to see where we are. And, I can't really explain as what they do, and that's why Jesse's here to kind of step up and show you with her PowerPoint what we hope to do and what we think we're collecting now. So I'm going to turn it over to her, and then I'll...
I just want to say thanks, Alex, for the introduction and for opening your office up to the Justice Center over these past, I kept practicing saying 6 months, but I guess it's been 10 at this point, as we help turn the Harris County Public Defender Office into a national learning site. So this is the things I kind of want to touch on today for everybody. First, National Learning Site is not just about Harris County learning what it's like to put a public defender's office together. It's also about the Justice Center learning about what it takes to put a public defender's office together. If I had an idea about what the perfect office looked like, I could be up here presenting my book, A Perfect Public Defender's Office, but unfortunately, I don't know. So that's kind of what we're there doing, and I'll mention a little bit more on that in a minute. And then I'm going to go into some of the challenges of measuring outcomes that I've come across over these past 10 months, and then just show a timeline of what our next steps are. So the National Learning Site, we want to work with Harris County to identify process and implementation challenges that they've gone through, so we can document strategies to address the challenges, and then eventually evaluate the outcomes from the office. And we would like to present these in 2 different ways. First, a report for state and local officials to determine the effectiveness of the money that they've put in. And second, a national report documenting lessons learned, as well as offering a how-to plan for any other area that would want to set up their own public defender office. So in evaluating the outcomes, we've run across some challenges of measuring them. Everybody has kind of an idea about what metrics we should be looking at. But every time I hear about it, it seems more like flipping through a case file and looking at one individual. Now, I want to take all of these disparate data elements and put them together as more of a broad picture so we can look at what patterns are emerging and what direction we need to be going forward. So the first two areas with cost and standards that I've noticed challenges with, these two variables seem somewhat simple, right? Standards, they're set up in the policy and procedure manual. It's very easy to look through this, tracking system that they've set up to say, like, yes, we have met with the client. Yes, we've sent this letter. Looking to make sure everyone's meeting their caseload. And cost, I can get that from, both Harris County and state. I know the money coming in. Put it together and get, per case, per task cost. But what does this look like? Does this give us a directional arrow as to how to move the program forward, how to, meet more challenges, how to, address the concerns that the office has? So that's one thing that we're working on going forward. The second two are kind of a different style of challenge. Now, recidivism is somewhat easy to measure. I do this on a somewhat frequent basis in our other projects, so I can look at, for the mental health caseload, felony, juvenile, what this 3-year rearrest looks like. But the challenge here is more about drawing the directional arrow. The mental health program, these people are also turned over to MHMRA. They leave with a case plan, so I can see how perhaps their interaction with the justice system would end up having a lowered recidivism rate. But felony and juvenile are not getting anything divorced of representation. So, how do we show why interaction with the public defender's office would lower recidivism? And the other area is measuring, the justice outcomes. This is kind of what everyone's been talking about all morning. How do we know that we're getting better justice? Well, the first thing we're kind of thinking of is ask, right? The perception, are you getting better justice? They have an entire client list. We can do a perception study on the way out to at least make sure the clientele feel like they're being represented to the best degree possible. Also, there's mitigation of sentences. So we know about 95% of cases nationally are solved through plea bargaining. So all I have to do is take the clientele of the public defender's office, match them on criminological and demographic information points to clients of appointed attorneys and retained attorneys, and see if the sentences are shorter, see if the fines are lessened, and then make the comparison, present this to you in 2 years. And then the last would be protection against sufficiency of counsel. This is probably the most invisible measure. How do I know that this taped down wire here is helping me from careening off the stage? I don't think anyone's sitting around measuring how many times that happened. Well, unless it probably just happened the once before they taped it down. But, so there's two ways that I think that the office does it. First is definitely through the standards. They have caseload limits. They have certain policies and procedures that they have to meet and follow. Second, they have an appellate division. Any kind of deficiency of counsel that has occurred prior to the case coming before the public defender's office down the chain will be able to be hopefully rectified once it comes before the office. So here's kind of my next... does... I'm sorry.
Doesn't that depend on whether the appellate division is authorized to do habeas writ?
Does it?
It definitely makes, that would make a difference. It limits us if we can't do them. So.
Okay, so my next step going from this point forward would be trying to identify data sources, which we have been working with the county over the past 10 months. These would be both client level, individual information points from different criminal justice databases, as well as aggregated financial data from both county and state sources. Then I'm going to try to organize all of this into a workable database, matching the client across the various criminal justice databases, and then do some analysis on cost effectiveness and outcomes. There's also some things related to organizational development in which and by I actually don't mean me, I mean the office, will be, looking to put together a panel to address standards, program design, information system, and reporting. So things related to standards are the type of things on this list. This is like, developing training modules, performance evaluation. Program design is, as Alex said, the felony division started up at the beginning of October. The juvenile defense will start taking cases in December. So there'll be some design, documentation, and development of standards for these programs, as well as reviewing issues related to indigent standards and assisting the Texas Indigent Defense Commission on related work. And then information system and reporting is both how Harris County Public Defender presents itself, having a web presence, how it, presents itself through performance measurements to the state, but also kind of internal things surrounding information system and software user manuals and protocols. And then finally, we're going to take, everything we've learned, everything we've measured, and try to translate it to different key audiences. So the county commissioners are probably the first audience that we're going to talk with for counties around Texas that want to start up their own public defender's office. And then next, the 83rd Texas Legislature, which convenes in January of 2013 to show, what happened with their grant monies, what the public defender's office has been doing. And then finally, the national audience, the how-to guide and lessons learned that I mentioned at the beginning. So this will be pretty similar to what we're showing county commissioners, except we'll take the Texas basis out of it. And so then, nationally, people will have kind of a good baseline to start with in setting up their public defender office. So that's it from me. If you have any kind of questions or comments, it's my email, unless you're someone weird on the web. And hopefully you can't see it.